They called it the Hippocratic Dilemma. August of 1878. Riding toward salvation with morphine and sutures. Found him bleeding in the canyon. The man whose gang murdered my wife and daughter 3 years back. His wound was mortal without treatment. My oath demanded I save him. My grief demanded I watch him die. For 6 days in that abandoned cabin, I fought a war no bullet could end. These lands know pain better than joy. Every mark in the sand tells a story, but folks rarely listen. I saw this tale with my own eyes, like the crackle of a fire at night. The shadows of the past don't leave. You'd best listen close. Out here, it's the only way to survive. The desert heat pressed down like God's own judgment, turning the New Mexico territory into a furnace where even hope dried up and blew away. Dr. Nathaniel Cain rode his roan mare through the Sangre de Cristo foothills, medical bag secured behind his saddle, carrying medicines toward a mining camp called Redemption Wells where cholera had taken root like a weed choking out life. 43 years old, face weathered to leather by frontier sun, hands steady from 20 years of cutting and stitching human flesh. He'd been a Union surgeon during the war, had operated in field hospitals where screams outnumbered prayers and death came in waves that left him numb to suffering. After the war, he'd taken his medical knowledge west, following the railroad construction crews, the mining camps, the scattered settlements where doctors were scarce and diseases plentiful. The canyon opened before him like a wound in the earth, rust-red walls rising 300 feet, shadows pooling in the depths where the afternoon sun couldn't reach. His mare picked her way down the narrow trail, hooves clicking against loose shale. The sound echoed strangely, multiplying until it seemed a dozen horses descended with him. That's when he heard it. Not hoofbeats, but something worse. A groan, low and desperate, the sound of a man trying not to scream. Nathaniel's hand moved to the Navy Colt at his hip, an old habit from traveling alone through territories where violence was common as dust. He guided his mare toward the sound, rounding a boulder the size of a stagecoach. The man lay sprawled against the canyon wall, one hand pressed to his side where blood had soaked through his shirt, turning the faded blue fabric black. His face was gray beneath 3 days' growth of beard, eyes unfocused, but still fighting. His horse stood nearby, reins trailing, favoring its right foreleg. Nathaniel dismounted, his physician's instincts overriding caution. Gunshot wound. Recent, maybe 6 hours based on the blood loss. The man needed treatment immediately, or he'd bleed out within the hour. As Nathaniel knelt beside him, the wounded man's eyes focused. Recognition flared, followed by something darker. Fear. Doc Cain. The man whispered, his voice rough as canyon stone. Didn't expect mercy from you. That voice. Nathaniel knew it the way you know a recurring nightmare. Knew it from 3 years ago, from a homestead burning orange against the night sky, from screams that still woke him gasping in darkness. Tate Holloway, the right-hand man of the Driscoll gang, the man who'd held Nathaniel at gunpoint while the others dragged his wife Sarah and 7-year-old daughter Emma into the barn. Who'd laughed, actually laughed, when the screaming started. Nathaniel's hands froze inches from the wound. His medical bag sat open beside him, instruments gleaming in the harsh sunlight. Morphine, sutures, carbolic acid for sterilization. Everything needed to save this man's life. The Hippocratic Oath he'd sworn 23 years ago at the Philadelphia College of Medicine rose in his memory like an accusation. First, do no harm. Treat the sick regardless of station or circumstance. Preserve life above all else. But Sarah's face rose too, Emma's small hand in his. The smell of smoke and blood and violation that had clung to the ruins of his homestead. 6 of them had ridden into Nathaniel's life that October night in 1875. The Driscoll gang wanted to cross 3 territories for robbery, murder, rape. They'd stopped at his homestead looking for water and supplies. When Nathaniel had told them to take what they needed and leave, Cole Driscoll had smiled that terrible smile and said, "We'll take it all." They'd found the $300 Nathaniel had saved for Emma's schooling back east. Found a gold watch that had belonged to his father. Found Sarah and Emma. When it was over, When the gang had ridden away with laughter still hanging in the air like gun smoke, Nathaniel had stumbled from where they'd left him tied in the root cellar. The barn was ash. The house was burning. And in the wreckage, he'd found them. He'd buried them on the hill overlooking the creek where Emma used to catch frogs, had carved their names into wooden markers with hands that shook so badly he could barely hold the knife, had stood there as the sun rose, feeling something essential crack inside him, the part that believed in mercy and justice and God. For 3 years, he'd carried that crack like a wound that wouldn't heal, had moved from town to town, practicing medicine because it was all he knew how to do, but feeling nothing when patients thanked him, nothing when they lived or died, just the hollow echo of loss and the burning need to find the men who destroyed his world. Now one of them lay bleeding at his feet, dying without intervention. Nathaniel's hand hovered over his medical bag. Take out the morphine, stop the pain, sterilize the wound, remove the bullet, suture it closed. Simple procedures he'd performed hundreds of times. Automatic as breathing. But his hand wouldn't move. Please, Holloway gasped, blood bubbling at the corner of his mouth, a sign of internal bleeding, lung probably compromised. I know what we done. Know I deserve whatever you want. But please, don't let me die like this. How did my wife die? Nathaniel's voice came out flat, emotionless. How did my daughter die? Holloway's eyes closed. Tears leaked from beneath his lids, cutting tracks through the dust on his face. Doc, please, answer the question. His voice broke. They suffered. I didn't. I tried to stop Cole, but oh God, I can still hear them screaming. The canyon wall seemed to close in, the shadows deepening despite the afternoon sun. Nathaniel felt the weight of 3 years pressing down on his shoulders, the accumulated grief and rage and helplessness coalescing into a choice he'd never imagined having to make. Let him die. Walk away. Chalk it up to frontier justice, to karma, to the natural order of violent men meeting violent ends. No one would ever know. No one would ever judge him, except himself, except the oath he'd sworn when he still believed oaths mattered. Nathaniel reached into his medical bag and pulled out the morphine syringe. His hands were shaking, not from age or weakness, but from the effort of controlling the war raging inside him. Every instinct screamed to let this man bleed out, to watch him die the way Sarah and Emma had died. But he'd spent 3 years becoming something he hated, a hollow man, a ghost walking through the motions of living. If he let Holloway die now, if he violated everything his profession stood for, what would be left? This is going to hurt, Nathaniel said, his voice rough. The morphine will help, but removing the bullet, you'll want to scream. Why? Holloway's eyes opened, confusion mixing with hope and fear. Why are you, after what I'd done? Because if I let you die, I'm no better than the man who killed my family. Nathaniel inserted the morphine needle, pressed the plunger. Because my wife believed in mercy even when the world gave her none. Because somewhere in this godforsaken territory, there has to be one man who keeps his oaths. He worked quickly once he started, his training overriding emotion. The bullet was lodged near Holloway's kidney, had nicked the organ, but missed the major vessels. Pure luck. Nathaniel extracted it with forceps, cleaned the wound with carbolic acid that made Holloway scream, despite the morphine, then sutured both entry and exit wounds with neat, precise stitches. 2 hours. That's how long it took to save the life of the man he'd spent 3 years hating. When it was finished, Nathaniel sat back against the canyon wall, exhausted in ways that had nothing to do with physical labor. Holloway had passed out from the pain, his breathing shallow but steady. He'd live, probably, if infection didn't set in, if they could get him somewhere safe to recover. Nathaniel looked up at the sky, now shading toward orange and purple as the sun descended. What have I done? He whispered to the vastness. Sarah, what have I done? No answer came, just the whisper of wind through the canyon and the distant cry of a hawk circling overhead. But as Nathaniel sat there in the gathering dusk, he realized something had changed. The hollow echo inside him, the empty space where his heart had been, felt different. Not healed, never healed, but less empty. as if choosing mercy over vengeance, had cracked open a door he'd thought permanently sealed. He built a fire as darkness fell, using dried mesquite and creosote brush. Holloway woke twice, delirious, calling out names Nathaniel didn't recognize. Each time, Nathaniel gave him water, checked his bandages, then returned to staring into the flames. At dawn, he'd have to decide. There was an abandoned line shack 2 miles north. He passed it yesterday. They could hole up there while Holloway recovered enough to travel. Or Nathaniel could leave him here with water and supplies, ride on to Redemption Wells, fulfill his obligation to treat the cholera outbreak. Or he could finish what the bullet had started. The thought rose unbidden, seductive as poison. No one would know. A reopened wound, a fall from his horse, a dozen plausible stories. Nathaniel looked at his hands, silhouetted against the firelight. These hands had brought Emma into the world, had caught her when she was born slippery and screaming, had held Sarah's hand the day they married, had closed the eyes of soldiers too young to die, had sworn an oath to preserve life. These were not hands that murdered, even if the man deserved it, even if justice demanded it, even if 3 years of grief screamed for it. "I'm taking you to the line shack," Nathaniel said aloud, though Holloway couldn't hear him. "You're going to recover. And then," he paused, uncertain, "then we'll figure out what comes next." The fire crackled, sending sparks spiraling into the infinite darkness above. And somewhere in that darkness, Nathaniel thought he heard Sarah's voice, not condemning, not approving, but simply bearing witness to the choice he'd made, the choice that would define everything that came after. Getting Holloway to the line shack took 6 hours of agony. The wounded man drifted in and out of consciousness, each movement reopening the fragile work of Nathaniel's sutures. By the time they reached the squat structure, half buried in a hillside, its log walls weathered gray, dawn was breaking across the eastern sky in shades of rust and blood. The shack was one room, maybe 12 by 15 feet, with a stone fireplace that had seen better decades, and a single window shuttered with rotting wood. Nathaniel kicked open the door, disturbing a family of pack rats that scattered into the corners. He dragged Holloway inside, laying him on the dirt floor with more care than the man deserved. The next 2 days passed in a fugue of medical routine punctuated by memory's assault. Nathaniel cleaned wounds, administered morphine, forced water and thin broth down Holloway's throat when he was conscious enough to swallow. Between these tasks, he sat by the fire and stared at nothing, wrestling with what he'd done and what it meant. Sarah had been a teacher before they married, had taught in a one-room schoolhouse in Pennsylvania where children from mining families learned their letters and numbers. She believed education could lift people out of poverty, that knowledge was its own kind of salvation. When she'd agreed to move west with Nathaniel, she'd brought 50 books in a trunk, everything from Shakespeare to agricultural treatises, and had started teaching Emma from the day the girl could focus her eyes. Emma had been brilliant, 7 years old and already reading at a level that would shame most adults. She'd wanted to be a doctor like her father, had followed him on house calls, asking questions that made him realize how little he actually understood about the mysteries of the human body. All of that, all of it, destroyed in one night because violent men wanted $300 and decided to take more. Nathaniel looked across the shack at Holloway, who was sleeping fitfully, fever starting to spike despite the carbolic acid treatment. Infection was setting in, inevitable in these conditions, with dirt floors and no way to sterilize properly. The moral choice would be to ride for help, bring back supplies, fight the infection with everything modern medicine could offer. The easier choice would be to do nothing, let nature take its course, blame it on the wound, on the circumstances, on fate. Nathaniel stood, walked to his medical bag, and pulled out his last vial of carbolic acid. He had enough for maybe 3 more treatments. After that, Holloway's survival would depend on his constitution and luck. He cleaned the wound again, noting the angry red streaks radiating from the sutures, blood poisoning spreading. Holloway screamed, coming awake, his hand grabbing Nathaniel's wrist with surprising strength. "Kill me," Holloway gasped. "Just make it quick. Can't take this pain." "That would be merciful," Nathaniel replied, not looking at him. Too merciful for what you've done. Then why save me? Holloway's eyes were bloodshot, delirious. Why not? Let me die in Canyon. Because I took an oath. Your oath means more than your family? The question hit like a physical blow. Nathaniel sat back, the bloodied cloth in his hand dripping onto the dirt floor. Does it? Should it? I don't know, he admitted quietly. For 3 years, I've been trying to figure that out. Whether medicine matters when the world is full of men like you. Whether healing means anything when violence erases it so easily. Holloway laughed, a sound like breaking glass. You think? I don't know that. You think? I haven't spent 3 years drowning in whiskey, trying to forget? You remember them. Every night. Holloway's voice dropped to a whisper. Your wife, she fought. Tried to protect. Your daughter. Cole hit her with his rifle butt. Broke her jaw. She couldn't scream after that, but your daughter could. Stop. Nathaniel's voice was raw. You asked. Holloway's eyes locked on his. You want to know how they died? I'm telling you. Cole dragged your daughter into the barn. Made me stand watch. I heard everything. When it was over, he set the fire. Said it would cover evidence. But I heard them, still alive when the flames started. Nathaniel's hands were shaking so badly, he dropped the cloth. The vial of carbolic acid slipped from his fingers, shattering on the floor, the sharp chemical smell filling the shack. Why? The word came out strangled. Why tell me this? Because you saved my life, when you should have killed me. Because I owe you the truth. And because Holloway's breathing grew labored. Because maybe, if you know, you'll finish what that bullet started. The silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. The fire crackled. Wind whistled through gaps in the shutters. Nathaniel sat frozen, hands still shaking, mind fragmenting under the weight of images he tried for 3 years not to imagine. Sarah's broken jaw, Emma's screams, the barn burning with them still alive inside. He thought he understood his loss, thought he'd plumbed the depths of his grief. But hearing it described in clinical detail, hearing the truth of their final moments, opened wounds he'd thought scarred over. Nathaniel stood slowly, walked to the far wall, and vomited. His body shook with spasms that had nothing to do with nausea and everything to do with the shattering of whatever fragile control he'd maintained. When he was done, he wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and turned to face Holloway. The rest of the gang, Nathaniel said, his voice deadly calm. Where are they? Scattered. Cole went south to Mexico. The twins, Jed and Jesse, they got killed in a bank robbery in Tucson. Frank Reyes, he's working as a ranch foreman near Santa Fe. And me, I've been running since that night. Running from what? The law. The memories. Holloway's laugh was bitter, mostly for myself. Nathaniel returned to his medical bag, pulled out a fresh cloth and the last of his clean water. He began cleaning Holloway's wound again, his movements mechanical, automatic. What are you doing? Holloway asked. My job. After what I just told you. Especially after. Nathaniel's eyes met his. Because if I kill you now, it's murder. Not justice. Not healing. Just adding more blood to blood. And I've decided something in the last 3 days. What? That my wife and daughter don't get honored by me becoming like the men who killed them. Nathaniel tied off a fresh bandage. They get honored by me staying who I was. Who they needed me to be. A doctor. A healer. Someone who keeps his oaths even when it costs him everything. You're insane, Holloway whispered. Maybe. But I'd rather be insane and honorable than sane and monstrous. Over the next 2 days, Holloway's fever broke. The infection receded. His body, scarred by hard living but still young enough to heal, began knitting itself back together. Nathaniel watched this process with clinical detachment, noting the stages of recovery, adjusting treatments, doing what doctors do. But at night, lying on the hard ground across the room from the man who'd helped murder his family, Nathaniel dreamed, not of Sarah and Emma dying, but of them living. He dreamed of Emma graduating from medical school, following in his footsteps, dreamed of Sarah teaching children in a proper schoolhouse, her voice strong and certain, dreamed of the life that had been stolen and the lives that had been prevented from ever existing, And he woke each morning with the same question burning in his mind. What would Sarah want me to do? On the fourth day, Holloway was strong enough to sit up, to eat solid food, to speak in complete sentences, without gasping for breath. He watched Nathaniel move around the shack with an expression that mixed gratitude, confusion, and something darker. "You hate me," Holloway said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." "Want me dead?" "Yes." "But you won't kill me?" "No." "Why not?" Nathaniel was quiet for a long moment, stirring the pot of rabbit stew he'd prepared. "Because killing you won't bring them back. Won't heal anything. Won't change what happened. It'll just add one more dead man to a territory that's already drowning in corpses. So what happens now? When I'm strong enough to ride." Nathaniel ladled stew into a tin cup, handed it to Holloway. "That's what I've been trying to figure out. The law wants you. You're wanted for robbery, murder, assault in 3 territories. Turning you in would be justice. Would it?" Holloway sipped the stew. "Or would it just be revenge with legal paperwork? Maybe both. Maybe neither." Nathaniel sat across from him. "All I know is that I saved your life, because my oath demanded it. What do you do with that life? Whether you use it to become someone different or waste it running from ghosts, that's your choice. And if I choose to run, to disappear, then I won't stop you. But I'll know, and so will you, that you were given a second chance and threw it away." Holloway stared into his cup as if it held answers instead of stew. "You're asking me to what? Turn myself in? Face the hangman? I'm asking you to face yourself. To decide if the man who helped burn my family alive is who you want to be for the rest of your life, or if there's something worth redeeming beneath the monster." The silence that followed was broken only by the crackling fire and the endless desert wind. Holloway set down his cup, wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "I don't know if I can be redeemed," he said quietly. "Don't know if a man can do what I've done and ever be clean again." "Neither do I," Nathaniel replied. "But I'm trying to find out. Because if you can't be redeemed, if men like you are beyond saving, then maybe my work as a doctor doesn't mean anything. Maybe healing bodies is pointless when souls stay broken. You're using me," Holloway said with sudden clarity, "as a test, to prove something to yourself." "Yes, and if I fail, if I ride away and go back to being what I was, then I'll have my answer, that some men are beyond mercy, and I'll stop saving them." Holloway laughed, sharp and bitter. "No pressure, then." "None at all," Nathaniel agreed. "Just the weight of whether human beings can change, or if we're all just animals pretending to be something better." On the morning of the 6th day, a rider appeared on the horizon. Nathaniel spotted him from the shack's doorway, a dark silhouette against the pale desert sky, moving steadily toward them. His hand moved instinctively to his revolver, but he didn't draw. Not yet. Inside, Holloway struggled to sit up, his healing wound pulling with the movement. "Company? Looks like it. Law? Probably." Nathaniel watched the rider resolve into details. A tall man on a paint horse, wearing a duster and a wide-brimmed hat. A star glinted on his chest even from a distance. Or a bounty hunter. Same difference. Holloway's face had gone pale. "Doc, if that's Marshall Garrett. You know him. He's been tracking me for 8 months. Ever since the Tucson job went bad." Holloway grabbed Nathaniel's arm. "He won't take me alive. He'll shoot first, claim I resisted." "And did you resist during the Tucson robbery?" Holloway looked away. "Doesn't matter what I did. Matters what he thinks I did." The rider was close enough now that Nathaniel could make out his features. A weathered face, gray mustache, eyes that had seen too much frontier violence to be surprised by any of it. He reined his paint 30 feet from the shack, his hand resting on his holster. "Morning," he called out, his voice carrying the flat authority of law. "I'm Marshal Thomas Garrett, Territorial Jurisdiction, looking for a fugitive named Tate Holloway. Word is he was shot in a dispute over cards 3 days back. Last seen heading this direction." Nathaniel stepped fully out of the shack, positioning himself between the marshal and the door. "I'm Dr. Nathaniel Cain. I've got a patient inside recovering from a gunshot wound. That your patient wouldn't happen to be Holloway, would it?" "Might be." Garrett's expression didn't change, but his hand tightened on his revolver. Then I'll need you to step aside, Doctor. That man's wanted for murder, robbery, and assault. He's coming with me. He's in no condition to travel. The wound's barely closed. Moving him now could kill him. Then I'll make it quick. Garrett dismounted, his movements deliberate. Step aside. No. The word hung in the desert air between them. Garrett's eyes narrowed. You're obstructing justice, Doctor. That's a crime. I'm protecting my patient. That's my job. Nathaniel's hand moved to his own revolver. You want him? You'll have to go through me. Garrett studied him with the practiced assessment of a man who'd faced down dozens of situations like this. You know what he's done? The people he's killed? Yes. And you're still protecting him? I'm not protecting him. I'm protecting the oath I swore to preserve life. There's a difference. From where I stand, looks the same. Garrett took a step forward. Last chance, Doctor. Walk away. Let me do my job. And you go on your way clean. And what's your job, Marshal? Justice or killing? Both when necessary. Then let me ask you something. Nathaniel met his gaze steadily. That man in there, Holloway, he's wanted for crimes he committed. No argument. But if you kill him today, who does that serve? The law. Or your need to close the case. The law doesn't care about needs. It cares about accountability. Does it? Because from what I've seen, the law out here is whatever the man with the gun says it is. And right now, that man is me. Garrett's jaw tightened. You're making a mistake, Doctor. Probably. But it's my mistake to make. The standoff stretched. Nathaniel could feel sweat running down his back, despite the morning chill. His hand ached from gripping his revolver. Behind him, he heard Holloway moving inside the shack, probably trying to stand, to face whatever was coming. Finally, Garrett spoke, his voice softer. I heard about what happened to your family, Doctor. 3 years back. The Driscoll gang. Nathaniel's stomach clenched. How do you know that? I make it my business to know. And I know Holloway rode with Driscoll. Was there that night. Garrett paused. So why are you protecting the man who helped murder your wife and daughter? Because killing him won't bring them back. Because justice isn't the same as vengeance. Because... Nathaniel's voice cracked. Because I need to believe that healing means something. That mercy matters. That we're not all just killers waiting for an excuse. Garrett was silent for a long moment. Then he slowly, deliberately, moved his hand away from his revolver. You're either the bravest man I've ever met or the most foolish, he said. Maybe both. He glanced at the shack. Holloway. From inside came a weak response. Marshal, you've got two choices. Come with me now, face trial, probably hang. Or stay under the doctor's care until you're healed. Then turn yourself into the territorial court in Santa Fe. Your call. Silence. Then, why would you give me a choice? Because apparently the doctor thinks you're worth saving. And I'm tired enough of killing to let him try. Garrett looked at Nathaniel. But understand this. If he runs, if he doesn't turn himself in, I'm coming back. And next time, I won't be so reasonable. Understood, Nathaniel said. Garrett mounted his paint, turned the horse, then paused. Doctor, your oath, the one about preserving life, it's a good oath. But don't let it blind you. Some men are beyond saving, no matter how good your intentions. Maybe, but I have to try. Yeah, Garrett touched the brim of his hat. I suppose you do. He rode away, disappearing into the desert shimmer. Nathaniel stood watching until he was gone, then turned back to the shack. Holloway sat on the floor, his face ashen. You just risked your life for me. I risked my life for my principles. There's a difference. Is there? Holloway shook his head. You heard the marshal. I've got until I'm healed to turn myself in. And then I hang. Probably. So what's the point? Why not just let Garrett take me now? Nathaniel knelt beside him, checked his wound. Healing well, no fresh bleeding. Because between now and then, you have time. Time to decide who you want to be in your final days. Time to make peace with what you've done. Time to maybe do something good to balance the scales. Balance the scales? Holloway's laugh was bitter. I murdered innocent people, Doctor. There aren't enough good deeds in the world to balance that. Maybe not, but you can try. Nathaniel stood. And in trying, maybe you'll find something worth dying for. Something better than just fear and guilt. What if I can't? Then you hang as the man you've always been. But at least you'll have tried to be something else. Holloway was quiet, staring at his hands. After a long moment, he said, "If I'm going to turn myself in, there's something I need to do first." "What?" "Find Cole Driscoll. Tell the marshal where he's hiding. Make sure at least one of the men who burned your family faces justice." Nathaniel felt something shift in his chest. "You'd betray your former partner?" "Partner?" Holloway's voice was hard. "Cole Driscoll isn't anyone's partner. He's a rabid dog that needs putting down. If my last act before hanging is pointing the law in his direction, that's something. You know where he is?" "Last I heard, he was in Las Cruces, running a gambling house. Uses a different name, but it's him." Holloway met Nathaniel's eyes. "I'll write it all down. Every detail, every crime, every location. Marshal Garrett can use it to build a case." "Why would you do that?" "Because you saved my life when you should have killed me. Because you're trying to prove that mercy matters." Holloway's voice dropped. "And because maybe I want to believe that too. That I can be something other than the monster who burned your family alive." Nathaniel turned away, not trusting his voice. After everything, after the grief, the rage, the 3 years of hollow existence, this was what mercy looked like. Not forgiveness, not forgetting, but the possibility, however slim, of transformation. "I'll get you paper and ink," Nathaniel said finally. "Write down everything. When you're healed enough to ride, we'll take it to Marshal Garrett together." "Together? I'm not letting you ride alone. You're still my patient." Nathaniel managed a grim smile. "Besides, someone needs to make sure you actually turn yourself in. Don't trust me?" "No, but I'm choosing to give you the chance to prove me wrong." Over the next 3 days, Holloway wrote, page after page, detailing crimes, locations, names. The testimony of a man unburdening himself before the final darkness. Nathaniel watched him work, noting how his hands shook, how he sometimes stopped to weep, how the act of confession seemed to physically drain him. This is what redemption looks like, Nathaniel thought. Not grand gestures or miraculous transformations. Just a broken man trying to face what he'd done and make whatever amends were possible before the rope took him. On the 9th day, Holloway was strong enough to ride. They packed up the lined shack, erased evidence of their stay, and headed north toward the territorial court in Santa Fe. The journey would take 5 days through dangerous country. As they rode, Nathaniel found himself talking, telling Holloway about Sarah, about Emma, about the life they'd had before the fire. Not to torture him, but to make them real, to ensure that someone other than himself remembered who they'd been. Holloway listened, occasionally asking questions, his face a mask of grief and guilt. And slowly, over those 5 days, something formed between them. Not friendship, never that, but a strange understanding. The recognition that they were both broken men trying to find meaning in a world that offered none. On the 4th night, camped beside a stream under stars so bright they seemed close enough to touch, Holloway spoke quietly. "Thank you, Doctor." "For what?" "For showing me that it's possible to be better than what I've been, even if it's too late to matter." "It's never too late to matter," Nathaniel replied. "Every choice we make matters. Every moment we choose mercy over cruelty matters, even when that choice leads to a hanging. Especially then, because it means you faced what you did, owned it, try to make it right." Nathaniel stared into the fire. "That's more than most men manage." They reached Santa Fe on the 5th day, riding into a town that bustled with commerce and conflict. Marshal Garrett was waiting at the territorial courthouse, his expression unreadable as they dismounted. "Didn't think I'd see you again," he said to Holloway. "Neither did I." Holloway handed over the pages of testimony. "Everything you need to find Cole Driscoll and build cases against him. Dates, locations, witnesses." Garrett leafed through the pages, his eyebrows rising. "This is thorough. It's the truth. All of it." Holloway straightened, meeting the marshal's eyes. "I'm ready to face trial now." "You know how this ends," Garrett said quietly. "I do, and I deserve it. But maybe this testimony will stop someone else from dying the way the doctor's family died." Nathaniel stood beside them, feeling the weight of the moment. 9 days ago, he'd faced the choice of letting this man die or saving him. He'd chosen mercy, not knowing where it would lead. Now, watching Holloway accept his fate with dignity, watching him try to make amends however inadequate, Nathaniel felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Not peace, never peace, but the beginning of acceptance. The recognition that Sarah and Emma's deaths didn't have to define him forever, that he could honor them by staying who he'd always been, a healer, a preserver of life, even when that life had harmed him beyond measure. "Marshal," Nathaniel said, "I'd like to testify at the trial, as a character witness." Garrett looked at him sharply. "You understand he'll hang regardless?" "I understand, but I want the court to know that he spent his final days trying to be better. That mercy was offered, and he didn't waste it." "Your call, Doctor." Garrett gestured to his deputies. "Take him to holding. Treat him with respect." As they led Holloway away, he turned back one last time. "Doctor, thank you for everything." Nathaniel nodded, not trusting his voice. And then he was alone with Marshal Garrett in the dusty street. "You're a strange man, Doctor," Garrett said. "Most men would have let him die in that canyon. Hell, most would have finished him themselves. Most men aren't bound by the Hippocratic Oath. Most men aren't as brave as you." Garrett extended his hand. "Thank you for believing in justice over vengeance." Nathaniel shook it. "I'm still not sure I did the right thing. Maybe that's what makes it right. The uncertainty, the struggle." Garrett tipped his hat. "Take care of yourself, Doctor. The territory needs men like you." As the marshal walked away, Nathaniel stood in the fading light, feeling the weight of 9 days slowly lifting from his shoulders. He'd chosen mercy, had saved a life that deserved death, had given a broken man the chance to face his sins with dignity, and in doing so, had begun to heal the wound in his own soul. It wasn't justice. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even redemption, but it was something. A starting point. A choice to honor his oath and his dead family by refusing to become what the Driscoll gang had been, a killer without conscience. Nathaniel mounted his mare and rode toward the setting sun, carrying with him the weight of mercy and the hope, fragile but real, that some debts could be paid not in blood, but in transformation. The territorial courthouse smelled of old wood, tobacco, and the sweat of anxious men waiting for justice to be served. Nathaniel sat in the gallery, watching the proceedings with the detachment of someone who'd already made peace with whatever verdict would come. Tate Holloway stood in chains before Judge William Hendricks, a white-haired man whose face bore the deep lines of 3 decades dispensing frontier law. The courtroom was packed. News of Holloway's capture had spread, and victims of the Driscoll gang's crimes had traveled from across the territory to bear witness. Marshal Garrett presented the evidence methodically, the testimony Holloway had written, corroborating statements from witnesses, physical evidence linking him to a dozen crimes across 3 territories. It was thorough, damning, and left no room for doubt. "How do you plead?" Judge Hendricks asked. Holloway stood straight despite his chains. "Guilty, Your Honor, to everything Marshal Garrett described and more." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Guilty pleas were rare in frontier courts. Most men fought until the rope took them, hoping for miracles or technicalities. "You understand that your plea carries a mandatory death sentence?" "I do." Holloway's voice was steady, "and I accept it. What I did, there's no punishment harsh enough. But I hope the information I've provided helps bring Cole Driscoll to justice. He's the real monster. I'm just a weak man who followed him." Judge Hendricks studied him for a long moment. "Before I pass sentence, does anyone wish to speak on the prisoner's behalf?" Nathaniel stood. His legs trembled slightly, but his voice remained firm. "I do, Your Honor." The judge's eyebrows rose. "And you are?" "Dr. Nathaniel Cain. I'm the physician who treated Mr. Holloway's gunshot wound 9 days ago." "Approach the bench, Doctor." Nathaniel walked forward, aware of every eye in the courtroom following him. He took his place beside Holloway, not looking at him, focusing instead on the judge. "Your Honor, I want the court to understand something about mercy," Nathaniel began. 9 days ago, I found this man bleeding to death in a canyon. I knew who he was, knew what he'd done. He was part of the gang that murdered my wife and 7-year-old daughter 3 years ago. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Judge Hendricks leaned forward. And yet you treated him? Yes, because I took an oath 23 years ago to preserve life regardless of circumstance. Because my profession demands that I see patients as human beings, not as crimes. And because, Nathaniel's voice caught, because I needed to know if mercy still mattered in a world drowning in violence. Did you find your answer, Doctor? I did. Nathaniel finally looked at Holloway. This man could have run, could have taken the medical treatment I gave him and disappeared into Mexico or territories where law doesn't reach. Instead, he wrote 50 pages of testimony detailing every crime he committed, every location Cole Driscoll might be hiding. He chose to face justice rather than flee it. That doesn't erase his crimes, Judge Hendricks said quietly. No, it doesn't. Nothing can. But it proves that even men who've done terrible things can choose to be better in their final days, can choose to help rather than harm, can choose truth over escape. Nathaniel's hands gripped the railing. I'm not asking you to spare his life. I know what the law requires. I'm asking you to note in the record that Tate Holloway, in his last days, tried to make amends. That mercy was offered, and he didn't waste it. The courtroom was silent. Judge Hendricks looked from Nathaniel to Holloway, his expression unreadable. Mr. Holloway, is what the doctor says true? Every word, Your Honor. He saved my life when he should have killed me. Showed me mercy I didn't deserve. And it changed something. Made me see that I could face what I'd done instead of running forever. Holloway's voice broke. I can't undo the harm I've caused. Can't bring back the people I've hurt. But I can make sure Cole Driscoll faces justice. And I can die knowing I tried, at the end, to be something other than a coward. Judge Hendricks was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice carrying the weight of frontier wisdom earned through countless impossible decisions. Tate Holloway, this court finds you guilty of murder, robbery, assault, and conspiracy. Under territorial law, you are hereby sentenced to death by hanging, to be carried out 1 week from today. However, he paused. In light of Dr. Cain's testimony and your cooperation with law enforcement, this court notes for the record that you spent your final days attempting to make amends. It's inadequate. It doesn't balance the scales, but it's something. And in the territories, sometimes something is all we can hope for. The gavel came down like a gunshot. As deputies led Holloway away, he turned back one last time. Thank you, Doctor, for showing me it was possible. Nathaniel nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in his throat. Outside the courthouse, Marshal Garrett found him standing in the afternoon sun, staring at nothing. You did a good thing in there, the marshal said. Did I? I spoke on behalf of the man who helped murder my family. You spoke on behalf of mercy. There's a difference. Garrett lit a cigarette, offered one to Nathaniel, who declined. That testimony Holloway gave us, we're already using it. Found Cole Driscoll in Las Cruces yesterday. He'll hang too, probably within the month. Does that make you feel better? Nathaniel asked. Knowing they'll both be dead? No, but it makes the territory safer. And that's my job. Garrett exhaled smoke. Your job is different. You heal. I punish. Both necessary. Both difficult. They stood in silence. Two men who'd chosen different paths toward the same goal. A world marginally less violent than the one they'd inherited. What will you do now? Garrett asked. Go to Redemption Wells. There's a cholera outbreak I was heading toward 9 days ago. People need treatment. After everything you've been through, you're still doctoring? It's all I know how to do. Nathaniel turned to leave, then paused. Marshal, when Holloway hangs, will you make sure it's quick? That the drop is measured right, the neck breaks clean? I always do, Doctor. Even for the worst of them. Thank you. Nathaniel rode out of Santa Fe that evening, leaving behind the courthouse, the trial, and Tate Holloway awaiting his appointed death. The road to Redemption Wells stretched before him. 3 days through desert country, toward a mining camp where disease was claiming lives and doctors were desperately needed. As he rode, he thought about the 9 days just passed, about the choice he'd made in that canyon to save a life rather than take it, about the testimony he'd given in court, speaking on behalf of mercy when vengeance would have been easier. He thought about Sarah, about what she would have said. She'd always believed in second chances, in the possibility of transformation, in education and enlightenment over punishment and revenge. And he thought about Emma, brilliant and curious, who'd wanted to be a doctor like her father, who believed, with a child's absolute certainty, that healing was the most important work anyone could do. They were gone. Nothing would bring them back. No amount of justice or mercy or philosophical contemplation would fill the void they'd left. But Nathaniel was still here, still bound by his oath, still carrying his medical bag from town to town, settlement to settlement, saving lives because that's what Sarah and Emma would have wanted him to do. The sun set behind him, painting the desert in shades of orange and purple. Ahead, Redemption Wells waited with its sick and dying, its desperate families, its need for someone who understood medicine and mercy. Nathaniel rode toward it, carrying with him the weight of 9 days and the hope, fragile but real, that his choice to honor his oath had mattered. That mercy, however costly, was still worth practicing. That in a territory defined by violence, healing was its own kind of revolution. And that somewhere, in whatever form consciousness took after death, Sarah and Emma knew he'd stayed true to who they'd needed him to be. Not a killer, not an avenger, but a doctor, a healer, a man who kept his oaths even when they broke his heart. Redemption Wells earned its name from optimism that had long since dried up. The mining camp clung to the side of a copper-rich mountain like a desperate prayer, 200 souls scratching at rock and hoping for a strike that would lift them from poverty. When cholera arrived on the heels of contaminated water from upstream mining operations, hope transformed into something darker, the grim certainty that death was coming for them all. Nathaniel rode into camp 3 days after leaving Santa Fe, his medical bag heavy with supplies purchased with the last of his savings. The stench hit him before he saw the settlement, the unmistakable smell of disease and death, of bodies evacuating their fluids in violent spasms, of lime spread over mass graves to slow decomposition. A man in his 50s intercepted him at the camp's entrance. Weathered face, exhausted eyes, a makeshift armband marking him as someone in authority. "You the Dr. Marshall Garrett wired ahead about?" "Dr. Nathaniel Cain. Where do you need me?" "Everywhere." The man's voice cracked. "I'm Thomas Webb, camp foreman. We've got 43 sick, 17 dead in the last week. The disease is spreading faster than we can bury the bodies." 43. The number hit Nathaniel like a physical blow. The same number of men who died in the mine collapse from one of the stories he'd heard, as if the territory had a quota of suffering it demanded. "Show me your water source first," Nathaniel said, dismounting. "Cholera spreads through contaminated water. If we don't stop the source, treatment won't matter." Webb led him to a creek that ran through the camp, its water running brown with runoff from upstream mining operations. Nathaniel knelt, examining the water, noting the metallic sheen, the faint chemical smell. "This water is poisoned," he said flatly. "Mining waste, arsenic, mercury, copper tailings. Every person who drinks from this creek is ingesting poison slowly and giving cholera a breeding ground. But it's the only water source for miles," Webb protested. "Without it, we die of thirst. With it, you die of disease." Nathaniel stood, mind already calculating logistics. "We need to dig wells, deep ones below the contaminated layer. And we need to boil every drop of water used for drinking or cooking until the wells are finished. That'll take weeks. We don't have weeks. Then we work fast." Nathaniel grabbed his medical bag. "Take me to the sick. I'll start treatment. You organize teams to dig wells and boil water. And for God's sake, isolate the infected from the healthy. Cholera spreads through contact with bodily fluids." The next 72 hours blurred into a nightmare of medical triage. Nathaniel moved from tent to tent, treating patients with the limited supplies he had. Oral rehydration salts to combat dehydration, laudanum to ease the cramping, carbolic acid to sterilize bedding. He worked until his hands shook from exhaustion, until he could barely remember which patient he'd already seen. The sick lay on crude cots, their bodies racked by violent diarrhea and vomiting. Cholera was a cruel disease, It drained the body of fluids until victims looked like animated corpses, their eyes sunken, their skin blue-gray, their voices reduced to hoarse whispers. Children suffered worst of all, their small bodies unable to withstand the dehydration. On the second night, a woman named Margaret Hayes grabbed Nathaniel's hand as he checked her 10-year-old daughter's pulse. The girl, Lily, was barely conscious, her lips cracked and bleeding, her breathing shallow. "Please," Margaret whispered. "She's all I have left. Her father died in the mines 6 months ago. If she goes, I have nothing." Nathaniel looked at Lily's gray face and saw Emma, saw his daughter and every suffering child, saw Sarah and every desperate mother. The wound he'd thought was healing ripped open fresh. "I'll do everything I can," he promised, his voice rough. He spent the next 6 hours forcing rehydration solution down Lily's throat drop by drop, massaging her cramping limbs, keeping her warm as fever and chills alternated. Margaret sat beside him the entire time, praying in a whisper that never stopped, the desperate bargaining of someone who'd already lost too much. At dawn, Lily's eyes opened. Her color improved from gray to merely pale. Her pulse steadied. She would live. Margaret wept, clutching Nathaniel's hand. "Thank you. Thank you. You saved her." But as Nathaniel left the tent, he passed 3 others where children hadn't survived the night, where parents sat in numb silence, staring at small bodies wrapped in canvas, trying to comprehend a loss that made no sense. He couldn't save them all. The realization was acid in his throat. No matter how hard he worked, how many hours he pushed himself, the disease was faster, stronger, more relentless than one doctor with limited supplies. On the 3rd day, as Nathaniel was suturing a wound on a miner who'd fallen while digging one of the new wells, Webb found him. "Doctor, we've got a problem. Another outbreak. Worse, some of the miners are planning to leave. They say the camp is cursed, that staying means death. If they go, they'll spread the disease to other settlements." Nathaniel finished his stitching, tied off the thread. "Then I need to talk to them." The miners had gathered near the camp's edge, about 30 men, packs loaded, horses ready. They looked at Nathaniel with the hollow eyes of people who'd made impossible calculations and chosen survival over community. "Leaving won't save you," Nathaniel said without preamble. "If you're infected, you're carrying the disease with you. You'll spread it to every town you stop in, every creek you drink from. You'll become plague carriers, and eventually, you'll die alone on some trail with no one to bury you. Better than dying here," one man spat. "This camp is finished. This camp can be saved. The new wells are almost done. The water will be clean. The sick are recovering, more each day. But only if we work together. If you run now, you guarantee this disease spreads across the territory. Why should we care? We didn't ask for this. Neither did the 43 people currently fighting for their lives in those tents. Neither did the 17 already buried. But we're all in this together, whether we like it or not." Nathaniel's voice hardened. "I'm asking you to stay, to help, to be the kind of men who build instead of run. And if we refuse, then I'll wire every settlement within 100 miles. I'll tell them you're carrying cholera, and they'll shoot you on sight before letting you bring disease into their towns." Nathaniel let that sink in. "Your choice. Stay and help save this camp, or run and die as pariahs." The silence stretched. Finally, one of the miners, a grizzled man with a scar across his cheek, stepped forward. "I'll stay. Lost my brother to this disease. If the doc says we can beat it, I'm willing to try." One by one, the others nodded, not enthusiastically, but with the grim determination of men who'd run out of better options. Over the next week, the tide turned. The new wells produced clean water. Nathaniel's treatment protocols stabilized the sick and prevented new infections. The death rate dropped from 3 a day to 1 every 2 days to, finally, none. 23 days after arriving in Redemption Wells, Nathaniel stood before 41 graves, the final toll of the outbreak. 41 people who died because someone upstream had dumped mining waste into a creek without caring about consequences. Webb stood beside him, his face haggard but alive. "You saved us, Doctor. Without you, This entire camp would be dead or scattered. I didn't save them, Nathaniel replied, gesturing to the graves. I couldn't. You saved 200. That matters. Does it? Nathaniel's voice was hollow. I spent 9 days agonizing over whether to save one man, a killer who'd helped murder my family. And here, I fought to save everyone and still lost 41. Where's the justice in that? There isn't any, Webb said quietly. Justice isn't something that exists naturally. It's something we build, person by person, choice by choice. You chose to come here instead of riding away. You chose to treat the sick instead of protecting yourself. You chose to make those miners stay instead of letting them spread disease. Those were all choices that built justice where there wasn't any before. Nathaniel was quiet, staring at the graves. In the distance, Redemption Wells was coming back to life. Miners returning to work, families cooking meals, children playing. The sounds of a community that had survived against odds that should have killed it. That night, as Nathaniel prepared to leave for his next destination, Margaret Hayes found him packing his medical bag. She carried a small bundle wrapped in cloth. "This is for you," she said, pressing it into his hands. "It's not much, just some bread and dried meat. But I wanted." She stopped, tears streaming. "I wanted you to know that Lily is alive because of you. That matters, Doctor. Even if you can't see it, it matters." Nathaniel unwrapped the bundle. Inside was food, and beneath it a drawing. Lily had sketched it in charcoal. A simple image of a man with a medical bag, standing between a group of people and a dark shadow. Above it, in a child's careful printing, "The doctor who saved U.S." It was so similar to the drawing Sarah had made, the one showing him and her under a sunrise, that Nathaniel's breath caught. "Tell Lily thank you," he managed. Margaret smiled through her tears. "She wants to be a doctor when she grows up. Says if you can save people, she can too." After she left, Nathaniel sat alone in his tent, staring at the drawing. 2 children, Emma and Lily, separated by death and time, but connected by the same belief that healing mattered, that saving lives was the most important work anyone could do. Maybe Webb was right. Maybe justice wasn't something that existed naturally, but something built through choices. And maybe the choice he'd made in that canyon, to honor his oath, to save Tate Holloway despite everything, had been the first brick in rebuilding the sense of purpose the Driscoll gang had destroyed. He carefully folded Lily's drawing and placed it in his medical bag, next to the bottle of carbolic acid and the morphine syringe, reminders of what he fought for when the weight of loss became too heavy. As dawn broke over Redemption Wells, Nathaniel mounted his mare and rode toward the next settlement, the next outbreak, the next impossible choice between what was easy and what was right. Behind him, 41 graves marked the cost of disease and human carelessness, but 200 survivors marked the value of one doctor's oath, kept even when keeping it felt impossible. The territory was vast. The suffering was endless. But Nathaniel Cain was still riding, still treating, still saving lives. Because that's what Sarah and Emma would have wanted. Because mercy, however costly, was still worth practicing. Because in the end, the Hippocratic Oath wasn't just about preserving life. It was about preserving the belief that life was worth preserving, even when everything suggested otherwise. 3 months after leaving Redemption Wells, Nathaniel received a letter. It arrived at a way station in Colorado Territory, forwarded through a chain of postal riders and frontier settlements, the envelope stained and worn from its journey. The return address said Santa Fe Territorial Prison. The handwriting was shaky, unpracticed, but legible. Nathaniel opened it with trembling hands, already knowing who'd written it. Dr. Nathaniel Cain. "I write this 3 days before I hang. Marshall Garrett says I can send 1 letter, so I'm sending it to you. I don't know if you'll ever read this, or if you'll care if you do, but I needed to say some things before the rope takes me. You saved my life in that canyon when you should have killed me. Gave me 9 days I didn't deserve. I spent those days trying to figure out why. Why you'd show mercy to the man who helped destroy your family. Why your oath mattered more than your grief. I think I understand now. It wasn't about me at all. It was about you. About staying who you were despite what we'd done to you. about proving that good men don't become monsters just because monsters hurt them. I'm writing this to tell you it worked. Your mercy didn't save my life. The law is taking that in 3 days. But it saved something else. My soul, maybe. Or just the idea that I could be something other than what the Driscoll gang made me. These past 3 months in prison, I've been different. Helping the other prisoners, teaching the ones who can't read, volunteering for the hardest work. The guards don't understand why. They think I'm trying to buy favor, to get my sentence reduced. But you'd understand. I'm trying to use whatever time I have left to be something other than a killer. Trying to honor the mercy you showed me by showing it to others, even in small ways. Marshall Garrett caught Cole Driscoll in Las Cruces. The testimony I gave helped convict him. He hangs 2 days after me. When I think about that, about the fact that my confession will stop him from hurting anyone else, I feel something I haven't felt in years. Pride. Not the pride of being strong or feared or dangerous. The pride of doing something right, even if it's too late to matter. Your wife and daughter, Sarah and Emma. I see them every night in my dreams. Not burning anymore, but standing together in sunlight, watching me. I don't know if that's my conscience or something more, but in those dreams, they don't look angry. They look sad, like they wish things had been different. I wish things had been different too. I wish I'd been strong enough to stop Cole that night. Wish I'd stood up to him, taken whatever beating or bullet he'd have given me. Your family might still be alive if I had, but I can't change the past. All I can do is face the future I've earned. The marshal promises it'll be quick, the drop measured right, the neck breaking clean. That's more mercy than I deserve, but I'm grateful for it. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know some crimes go beyond that. But I wanted you to know that the mercy you showed me, the choice you made to save my life instead of taking it, changed something, made me see that even men like me can choose to be better in our final days. That might not mean anything to you, might not balance the scales or bring back what was taken, but it means something to me. And maybe, in a territory drowning in violence, that's enough. Thank you, Doctor, for showing me what mercy looks like, for proving that oaths still matter. Even when keeping them costs everything. I hope you find peace. I hope you continue saving lives and keeping your oath. And I hope someday you can forgive yourself for saving me. Because I think that's the one thing still haunting you. You did the right thing in that canyon, even if it doesn't feel like it. Even if the weight of it presses on you every night. You stayed who you were when the world gave you every reason to become something else. That's the definition of courage. With respect and gratitude. Tate Holloway. P.S. I'm leaving what little money I have to the cholera victims in Redemption Wells. Marshall Garrett will make sure it gets there. It's not much, maybe $40, but it's clean money, earned through prison work. I want to use to help the families who lost someone in the outbreak. Small amends, but something. Nathaniel read the letter 3 times. His vision blurring with tears he didn't try to hide. He was alone at the way station, waiting for a stage that would take him toward his next assignment. Around him, the Colorado wilderness spread vast and indifferent, mountains rising like cathedral spires against a sky so blue it hurt. He thought about that choice in the canyon, the moment when he'd reached for his medical bag instead of walking away. How it had felt like betraying Sarah and Emma, like choosing the killer over his family. But maybe it had been the opposite. Maybe it had been choosing to honor them by staying who he'd always been. The man Sarah had married, the father Emma had looked up to. A doctor, a healer, someone who kept his oaths even when they shattered him. Tate Holloway hanged 3 days later. Nathaniel read about it in a newspaper 2 weeks afterward, a brief article noting that the last member of the Driscoll gang had been executed for his crimes. Marshall Garrett was quoted saying the condemned man had faced death with dignity, and his testimony had prevented future violence. No mention of the 9 days in a lined shack. No mention of a doctor's choice to save him. No mention of mercy offered and not wasted. But Nathaniel knew, and that was enough. He kept Holloway's letter with Lily's drawing and the testimony papers tucked into his medical bag, where he carried everything that reminded him why he did this work. On difficult days, when the suffering seemed endless and his oath felt like a burden too heavy to bear, He'd take them out, and remember, that mercy wasn't weakness, that keeping oaths mattered, that even men who'd done terrible things could choose to be better in their final days, that Sarah and Emma's deaths didn't have to define him forever, that he could honor them by staying who he'd always been, a healer, a preserver of life, someone who believed that even in a violent world, compassion was worth practicing. 6 months after Holloway's execution, Nathaniel received another letter. This one from Margaret Hayes in Redemption Wells. Lily had fully recovered and was helping the camp's new doctor, a young man named Peters who'd taken over when Nathaniel left. She was learning medicine, Margaret wrote, studying from books Nathaniel had left behind. She talks about you constantly, Margaret's letter said, calls you the bravest man she's ever met. Says when she grows up, she's going to be just like you, traveling from town to town, saving lives, keeping her oath no matter what. I wanted you to know that your time here mattered, Dr. Cain, that the mercy you showed us continues to ripple outward. Lily is alive because of you, and because she's alive, she'll go on to save others. That's how good spreads in this world, one choice, one life at a time. Nathaniel sat beneath a cottonwood tree, reading Margaret's words as the sun set over the New Mexico territory. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. Somewhere closer, a settlement needed a doctor. He thought about the question Tate Holloway had asked in that lined shack. Does your oath mean more than your family? The answer, Nathaniel realized, wasn't either or. His oath didn't mean more than Sarah and Emma. It was how he honored them, by staying who they'd needed him to be, by proving that violence and loss didn't have to transform him into something monstrous, by choosing every single day to save lives instead of taking them, to offer mercy instead of vengeance, to believe that in a territory defined by violence, healing was its own kind of revolution. As darkness fell, Nathaniel gathered his belongings and prepared for the next leg of his journey. Tomorrow, he'd ride toward a mining settlement where pneumonia had broken out. Next week, a cattle ranch where a woman was in difficult labor. Next month, another cholera outbreak, another gunshot wound, another impossible choice between what was easy and what was right. The work was endless. The suffering was relentless. The weight of his oath pressed down like the desert sun, unforgiving and constant. But Nathaniel Cain rode toward it anyway, because he'd made a choice in a canyon 6 months ago, a choice to save a life instead of taking it, to honor his oath instead of his grief. And that choice had saved more than Tate Holloway's life. It had saved Nathaniel's soul, proven that mercy still mattered. That oath still held weight, that even in the darkest moments, when violence seemed the only answer, there was another path, the harder path, the lonelier path, but the one that let him look at himself in the mirror and see a doctor instead of a killer, a healer instead of an avenger, a man who'd faced the ultimate test of his principles and hadn't broken. As stars emerged in the vast Colorado sky, Nathaniel thought of Sarah and Emma, not burning, not screaming, but standing together in sunlight, the way Tate Holloway had described them in his dreams, watching, bearing witness, perhaps even proud. He'd kept his oath. Against every instinct, every screaming demand for vengeance, every logical reason to let Holloway die in that canyon. He'd kept his oath, and in doing so, had discovered that the Hippocratic dilemma wasn't really a dilemma at all. It was a choice, the same choice every doctor made every day, to preserve life, even when life seemed unworthy of preservation, to offer mercy, even when mercy felt impossible, to be the person who healed instead of harmed, who built instead of destroyed, who chose hope over hate, the choice that defined not just doctors, but human beings who refused to let violence have the last word. Nathaniel mounted his mare and rode into the darkness, carrying his medical bag and his impossible oath toward the next settlement that needed him. Behind him, the graves of Sarah and Emma rested in soil 2 territories away. But he carried them forward too, in his heart, in his choices, in his refusal to become what the men who'd killed them had been. The Hippocratic dilemma. He'd faced it in a canyon, fought it in a line shack, wrestled with it through cholera outbreaks and courtroom testimony and letters from condemned men. And he'd won, not by defeating it, but by accepting it. by understanding that the dilemma wasn't O versus family, mercy versus justice, healing versus vengeance. It was about who you chose to be when the world gave you every reason to be someone else. Nathaniel Cain chose to be a doctor, and that choice, made in dust and blood and impossible circumstances, rippled outward across the frontier, saving lives, inspiring children like Lily, proving that even in the West's violent heart, mercy still mattered. Some debts, he'd learned, were paid not in blood, but in transformation. See you around, my friend. I've got another story for you.